All right, everyone. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Monday. My name is Dana. I'm a part of the education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And today we're going to be chatting all about why and how we should care for the oceans. So, in order to do that, we're going to be talking a little bit about a certain habitat, one that's actually really special to you and I because it's right here off of our coastline in Southern California. And then we're going to be talking about why that kelp or why that habitat is so important and all the animals that depend on it, how you and I might depend on it. And then we're going to end by saying, identifying some of the things we can do to help out. All right. So I know we do have our question doc over here. I have Cynthia in the studio with me who's going to be taking your questions throughout the program, passing them in towards me. I have Sarah behind the screen who's going to be controlling what's going on behind me. We're going to be exploring all sorts of different things this morning, and then we're going to take it in chunks. So like I said, we're first going to talk about a habitat, then we'll open it up for questions. Then we're going to talk about the importance of that habitat and how some of these animals are connected. Then we'll do questions, and then we'll end on that note of how and why we can help the ocean. All right. So to get started, we're going to explore, like I said, one of my favorite habitats here in Southern California. We're going to take a look at what's on the screen here in just a moment. Beautiful. All right. So what is this exactly? Is this familiar to you at all? Hopefully, if you've been joining us, you've been tuning in and learning a little bit about this habitat. This is a kelp forest habitat. All right. So kelp forest is this algae that you see right here, this kelp growing. Okay. And it's like a plant, but it's not. Now, when I say kelp is like a plant, but not, what I mean is that when we just look at it, right, from the beginning, it looks like a plant that we might find on land, but it gets its nutrients in a little bit of a different way. We're going to go over to my Explorer camera and we're going to take a look at what we might think is the root system, but it's actually something called a holdfast. Let's go check it out. All right, we're going to turn the lights on here in just a moment. There we go. Okay, my friends. Whoa, that is a lot. So, this thing right here, we're going to zoom in. What does it look like to you? Whoa, it's kind of just a tangled mass, right? That's it compared to my hand. So take a look. Well, if you were to think of a plant, this might be the roots, right? Where are the roots of our plants on land typically found? Yeah, they're usually underground, right? So this is called a holdfast. And what it does is it doesn't go underground, but it's holding the kelp onto rocks, onto the sea floor, anything hard that it can latch onto. But inside of here, all sorts of animals can live. Then we don't have it here because it's just the holdfast, but growing out the top, we would see that beautiful kelp frond that was just in Blue Cavern. Let's jump back to Blue Cavern and see if we can explore that a little bit more. All right, so holdfast, right? The holdfast would be this thing right here. See how it's kind of holding onto the rock? There's another one right over here and another big one back here that's holding this one on. And so the holdfast is the base, and then it comes all the way up, 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 up. We call that the stipe, and then it's got the blades of kelp, right? So you can think of it like a really big tree, and it's in the water column. Now, plants, they get their nutrients from the soil, from the roots, right? The roots take the nutrients from below, and they work up the system. But kelp, like our giant kelp right here, they can actually take nutrients from the water, and just like plants on land, they do, in fact, photosynthesize. So again, this is an algae. If you all put your hands up, ooh, we can sway like an algae, right? So our algae likes to move with the motion of the ocean. Now, this is a special algae because it's not just really big, but like I said, it is found here in Southern California, okay? And so it's only found in 5 places around the world, and we are one of them. Have you ever seen kelp? Either washed up on the beach or floating on the surface, or maybe you've gone out into the water. So that builds a huge ecosystem. An ecosystem is like an animal home right here in California. So let's just go back to Blue Cavern and we'll make some observations here for a moment. So what do we see? Oh, we see a shark. That was cool. Good timing. So is there anything else familiar in here? What do we notice? Ooh, some people are saying they see a lot of fish swimming around. Yeah. I see. Let's see. It looks like there's sandy bottom over here, maybe kind of rocky bottom, right? We've got some big rocks. So, what do you notice what's familiar, right? This is a good example or representation of a kelp forest habitat that you would find here. In fact, this image that we're looking at right now, if you look right down here, you can go to this image at explore.org or through the Aquarium of the Pacific's website, and you can actually watch this. This is one of our largest exhibits here at the aquarium. It's our Honda Blue Cavern exhibit. And you can take a look and make observations about our exhibit here that's modeled after a real dive site here in Southern California. This is modeled after the Blue Cavern dive site out at Catalina. Now, one more time, take another look. Why is this important, right? What's unique about this kelp forest habitat? Yeah, so there's a lot of animals moving around. We've got that beautiful algae. Now, kelp forests are important for animals and for us. In fact, kelp forests support over 800 different species of animals. 800 species, not individuals. So what that means is there'd be all sorts of fish and invertebrates, animals without a backbone, calling this place home. But it also is important for you and I. On the count of 3, we're all going to take a deep breath together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I feel much better. Now, when we took that breath in, we were taking oxygen out of the air. And believe it or not, but this algae that we see right here on the screen, this algae produces oxygen. When it takes the energy from the sun and it photosynthesizes, it's releasing oxygen into our atmosphere. And we get over 50% of our oxygen from algae in the ocean, just like this. So we're going to wrap it up there, talking about the importance of kelp forests, right? It supports a lot of animals. It supports us. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to ask some questions. We're going to roll into question time. We'll hang out on this screen. We'll give you a couple minutes to get those thoughts rolling. But what I want you to ask and what I want you to think about, maybe pose your questions around this, is if the kelp forest habitat is important, why might it be important other than just the animals it supports? What happens if you remove an animal? Those are just some things you can think about. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of questions coming in already. So we're going to go through. So it looks like you guys really focused on trash. So that's a really good topic to cover. I'm going to try to answer these questions as best as I can. Miss Reyes wants to know, how much of a difference do the new robotic ocean cleaning machines make? And is there a plan to use more of them? That's a really great question. So there's a lot of technology in the ocean these days and a lot of new ideas, and we're trying to find ways to clean and to support our oceans and remove as much trash and pollution. But it's almost a little too early to tell, right? And no matter how much we clean, if we're continuing to add waste into our oceans, we're just going to constantly be struggling to catch up. So removing any amount of waste is a great idea. But I think we need to look ahead, right? And look for bigger ways to do that. Look at ways to stop the pollution. I like to think of it as, if your bathtub was overflowing, would you grab a mop or would you turn the faucet off? You'd probably turn the faucet off first, right? So finding ways to continue the advancement of that technology and that cleaning, and also finding ways to reduce the production of waste, I think is going to make the biggest impact. We also have a question of how do the animals survive with all of the trash in the ocean? Yeah, that's a really good question. When we move on to our next topic, we're actually going to be talking about food webs. And that might be confusing. Why are food webs and trash related? But a lot of animals are impacted by trash because they eat it, thinking that it might be food. Now, sometimes they can get entangled. That happens as well. I'm sure we've seen pictures of like the Coke can rings, right, around birds, and nets and lines around marine mammals. But a lot of our struggle for our animals is the fact that they're ingesting it or they're eating it. So a plastic bag floating through the ocean, we might think of as a plastic bag, but that sea turtle or that mola mola, if we have a photo of that to give them context, they think of that as food. They don't know what a plastic bag is, right? And so this animal right here, this is the largest bony fish in the world. They eat jellies, right? So sea jellies. And like this is perfect. Now, if you didn't know what a plastic bag was, and you saw one drifting through the ocean, it could look a lot like this moon jelly right here. So they're ingesting it. A lot of our seabirds also take in bits of plastic. A lot of our fish take in bits of plastic. We actually had a marine mammal, a large whale, show up on shore with over 88 pounds of plastic in its stomach. So that's like a whole human, right, in its stomach full of plastic. So a lot of it is ingestion. So again, we're going to talk about the food web and our waste. But a lot of animals do survive, but it's getting harder and harder because there is more and more plastic in our oceans. Now, Daisy wants to know, how much time do we have left until the oceans become only trash? Daisy, that's a really great question. And it kind of goes back to my first answer. If we continue to produce the way we are, we're just going to see more and more waste. So instead of thinking about how we can clean it up, we have to think about how we can stop it, and that's going to determine the timeline. Mel wants to know, where are the endangered animals located? Mel, good question. So a kelp forest habitat like this actually is home to a lot of endangered animals, but there are endangered animals found all over the world. And we're going to chat about this one a lot in just a moment here. I'm going to answer, it looks like 3 more questions, and then we're going to move on to talking about this endangered animal that calls the kelp forest home. Leo wants to know, is scuba diving and cleaning the trash a way we can make the ocean healthy? Yes, Leo, I love that you brought that up. In fact, here in Southern California, there's a huge network of scuba divers and ocean kayakers and snorkelers and beachcombers that plan large events to clean up the waste in our water and on our beaches. So if that's something you friends are interested in, you can always talk to your family, talk to your friends, and you could organize a beach cleanup. You just want to make sure you do it safe. Wear your shoes, wear gloves, maybe even have some grabbers, right? So, yeah, that's one of my favorite dives to do, is to do a cleanup dive. Gerhalis wants to know, how would moving an animal affect the food chain? I love it. Affect the food chain. Great question. So we're going to be kind of answering a handful of those questions all in the next topic. And then Roble wants to know, do humans plant or grow kelp to help the ocean? Yeah, so this right here, right, this is, like I said, this is giant kelp. And we're learning ways to grow it and harvest it so that we're not removing natural kelp, because kelp is actually found in a lot of products that we use. So not only is it home to animals, not only do we get oxygen from it, but do you like ice cream? I love ice cream. Sarah's got her hand up like, I like ice cream. So ice cream actually uses a product that's found in kelp. It makes it thick and creamy for us, which is pretty important, right? Otherwise, we'd just be drinking milkshakes. So, yeah, we are finding ways to grow it and harvest it. Great question. Now, we're going to roll into our next subject. We're going to chat a little bit about the food web and why it's important. And I'm going to touch on the endangered species aspect. I'm going to touch on, what was the other one what's that? Yeah, and we're going to touch on the removing one, and there was one more, so I'll try to answer all 3 of those. So let's take a look back at that sea otter photo. Right, so I mentioned food webs, right? Now this is a southern sea otter, and they are found here in California. Now they used to be found all the way down in Southern California, but have you ever seen one here? I haven't either, and we're going to talk about why. So we talked about the kelp forest habitat as a whole, but now I want you to think about how all of these animals are connected. Okay, so What might a sea otter eat? Well, right here in this photo, this sea otter is eating clam. Sea otters like to eat a lot of different invertebrates. Again, those are animals without a backbone. So clams, they like to eat sea urchins and sea stars. Here's one of their favorite foods. This is the purple sea urchin. And what do you notice? What is the sea urchin sitting on top of? Yeah. So this sea urchin is actually sitting on top of a giant kelp blade, just like we saw there in Blue Cavern. And that is because sea urchin's favorite food, da 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 da, is giant kelp. So that's called a trophic cascade. That's a really big word, but what it means is it's a food chain, right? The sea otters eat the urchins and the urchins eat the kelp. They all depend on each other in some way. Now, sea urchins in particular, let's jump back to the Explorer cam. They like to feed on this holdfast. So remember, you can think of this like the root system, but instead of being underground, it's just holding on to the rocks, okay? Now, if this was holding onto the rocks, and here we're going to put a fake kelp blade. Ready? My markers here. That's like a kelp blade coming off, growing. If I was a sea urchin and I came in and I ate the holdfast, my little kelp blade here is just going to float away, right? And so let's jump back to Blue Cavern. So if we were to remove the base, that piece of kelp, that whole frond is going to drift away. And all of a sudden, where you had a beautiful kelp forest habitat, the urchins can come through and eat it all of it. But is that going to happen if you have sea otters? No, right? So the sea otters eat the sea urchins, and yet the sea urchins might eat some kelp, but there's not going to be enough of them to eat all the kelp, right? And so we have the question about the endangered species and what happens when we remove a species. So unfortunately for our southern sea otters that used to be found here in Southern California, they have really beautiful, thick fur, okay? So you can see on her right now, got this beautiful thick fur. In fact, if you've ever seen a sea otter, oftentimes they're going like this and they're cleaning themselves. What they're doing is they're fluffing up their beautiful fur, and it's very, very thick and very, very soft. And because of that, humans liked to hunt it, right? They like to hunt sea otters, and they would take their fur and they would make coats and they would make all sorts of products for us. But what happened to the sea otter population when we removed a whole bunch of them? Yeah, that's right. They started to drop, right? And if you were to remove the sea otters, what happens to the sea urchin population? What happens to them? Yeah, that's right. All of a sudden, there's so many of them that they're able to eat all of the kelp. And so we go from a beautiful kelp forest habitat with our urchins, our kelp blades, our sea otters. Let's jump back to Blue Cavern. We go from that beautiful kelp forest habitat like you see behind me, and we remove all of the kelp. What do we have all of a sudden? Well, we'd have rocks, right? We'd have real big rocks. We might have sandy bottom here, but that's it. And we actually call that an urchin barren. The urchins ate so much kelp that it's just like a desert underwater all of a sudden. And that all happened because humans went out and removed sea otters and turned sea otters into an endangered species. See how that all kind of connected together? Now, my friends, that was just one example of a kelp forest food chain. Think about some others. What others might eat each other inside a habitat like this? We're going to give it a minute. It looks like we have some questions coming in. And then we're going to move on to the fact that our actions do impact the oceans, okay? So think about what we've talked about already. Think about how our actions might impact a kelp forest habitat just like this, okay? We'll give you a minute to think of some questions. All right, everyone, did you see my hand come in on the screen? What's this right here? Yeah, that's not a kelp blade. That's actually our California moray eel, which is a pretty cool observation that Sarah just made. So we have a lot of amazing questions coming in from you right now. Sarah, not that Sarah, a different Sarah, a Sarah from your class, wants to know how many types of fish are in the aquarium? Ooh, that's a good question. Now we have over 12,000 animals here, but that's including our birds and our mammals. I don't know, for fish, would you say maybe 10,000? Yeah, we're going to go with 10,000, right? That's a safe bet. So there are a lot of fish here, but that's because we're representing more than just the kelp forest habitat. We're representing a coral habitat. We're representing a deep sea habitat. We're representing warm and cold water. So we do have a lot of different fish. Now, Carlos wants to know, can fish breathe if there is no kelp? Great question. So, Carlos, when we remove kelp, the fish are getting their oxygen from the water. And there is still a lot of other algae that are producing oxygen. So here's a bunch of fish. This is another representation of a kelp forest habitat. And so these animals, right, they have gills. They don't have lungs like you and I. And they do find other ways to get their oxygen. But if we were to remove all the algae in the ocean, a lot of the algae does produce oxygen that stays in the water. And so, yeah, eventually they might have a really hard time. Now, Anthony wants to know, what would happen if there is no kelp? Well, great question, Anthony. So remember, I mentioned that 800 species of animals live in kelp forest habitats. What happens if all of a sudden you take away kelp? Yeah, these 800 different species might have to find another way to live. Now, some animals eat kelp, so they might not have food. Some animals call kelp home. They hide in it, so they might not have a place to hide. In fact, there's one fish that looks just like a blade of kelp. Okay? Let me see if I can hold this up. It looks just like this. This is my fake kelp here. And it's called a kelp fish. Okay. And it even like sways in the water like this. And so that fish is specifically adapted, meaning its body type helps it survive to live in kelp. And if you remove that, all of a sudden that animal has no place to hide and predators might find it. So if we remove kelp, we're really going to be having disrupting a lot of animals' lives and putting them in a lot of danger. Will animals die if you remove it from its habitat? That's a good question. So some animals are able to live in a couple of different habitats. And so it depends on the animal, whether or not they're able to live in other areas. But if you were to take a fish out of water, that's one habitat that it's going to have to stay in, right? And that's because of those gills. So it depends on the animal, it depends on the habitat, and it depends if there's alternatives for that habitat. Giselle wants to know, is it hard to become a marine biologist? Yeah, Giselle, it can be. But if it's something you're interested in, there's a lot of resources out there for you to learn. And to be a marine biologist, there's a lot of different things that can mean. Some marine biologists spend their whole day on boats. Some marine biologists spend their whole day in labs. Some marine biologists, like myself, I have a degree in marine biology. I spend my day teaching, right? And passing that knowledge on to others. Some marine biologists work with mammals, some work with fish, some just work with the ocean. So it just depends. There's a lot of different routes you can take. Daisy wants to know, can fish lay eggs on coral? Yeah, they can, Daisy. So it depends on the fish. They have to live in a coral reef habitat, of course, not something like this. There we go. This is a beautiful coral reef habitat. And so certain animals definitely lay their eggs in those corals. Good. Let's see. Who monitors otter hunting? Ooh, good question. Who monitors otter hunting? So a lot of that is done by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Okay, so here's this cute little sea otter. The Department of Fish and Wildlife is a government agency that makes sure that people are following the rules when it comes to protecting wildlife. If you get caught hunting otters, you can get in a lot of trouble, right? So it's a law. Alexis wants to know, are there other animals that like to eat urchins? Yes. In fact, one of my favorite animals, if you can bring up the picture of Yeah, she knows what's up. There we go. This fish right here, this is called a California sheephead. Take a look at its mouth here. What do you notice? Yeah, do you see that white spot right there? That's a really big tooth. So our urchins are super spiky animals. So otters have found a way. They'll take rocks and they'll break the spines off. They have really hard teeth that can crunch and remove spines. And this fish, this California sheephead, also has found ways to break through those spines. They have really strong jaws and they have really big teeth. In fact, I got bit by one. And it was so cool. It hurt, but I was able to watch it. It bit me right on my arm. And thank goodness I had a wetsuit on. I had a lot of protection. And it bit me right here. And my first thought was, ow! And then my second thought was, oh, so that's how it breaks through urchin spines, right? So it was a really cool learning moment to kind of get an up-close personal experience on how these animals can break through those spines. Let's see. Leslie and Guadalupe want to know, how do sea otters help by eating urchins? So just like when they eat so many they make sure that there's not too many urchins, right? So imagine if your pizza ate ice cream. I know that's really crazy, but just imagine, right? Your pizza ate ice cream. Well, you eat your pizza. And if you were eating some pizza, then you would make sure that there was not too much pizza. Because if the pizza was eating all the ice cream, that would not be good, right? If we took you out of that equation, your pizza's going to eat all your ice cream. But if you eat a little bit of pizza, then you can also eat a little bit of the ice cream, and then the pizza doesn't eat all the ice cream, and it kind of just keeps everything in balance, okay? So we're gonna wrap it up here in just a moment by talking about why it's important that we can protect our oceans. So we talked about why even just removing one animal can make a huge difference, right? By removing sea otters from the kelp forest habitat, we basically destroyed this entire habitat. Now that came down to hunting, okay? But there's a lot of other things. At the beginning of the class, you all had a lot of questions about trash. Now, I mentioned that trash can often be ingested or eaten by animals. And if we start to kill off too many animals, then we're going to see the same effects ripple through the kelp forest habitat, right? Just by removing one, we can really see that change. So what I want you to take away from today is I want you to think about your impact on the ocean. And we've talked about this quite a bit throughout our programming this summer, but I want you to remember that every little thing we do can have a big effect out there. So for us, it might feel like we're just going to grab a plastic water bottle, right? Or soda out of the fridge. But if we don't dispose of that properly, that one plastic bottle cap can end up in our oceans and it can end up in a bird, right? And if that happens from all the people on Earth, that's all of a sudden a lot of bottle caps and a lot of birds. So think about your impact. Are there ways that you can not use plastic? Yeah, maybe. In fact, you could get a water bottle that's metal, right? You can fill that up at water fountains. What are some other things you can do? I want you all to think about ideas as well, right? We mentioned earlier, you can do beach cleanups. That's a really big help. You can pack your lunch in a piece of Tupperware and then take it home and wash it, right? Instead of baggies. Let's see. We can, there's so many things we can do. Oh, reusable bags at the grocery store. Thank you. So instead of going, especially right now, if you've noticed, there's a lot of bag shortages at grocery stores. A lot of them don't have paper bags anymore. They're using plastic. Now, a lot of those bags are used by a different kind of plastic that can be reused, or we can just bring our own bag, right? I like to bring a bag to the grocery store with me and make sure that I'm just taking the same bag back and forth. When I buy produce, I know this is mostly for your parents, but you can always have this conversation with them. When I like to buy fruits and vegetables, I don't grab one of the little plastic bags. They just go right in my bag. Right? So there's a lot of ways that we can reduce our single-use plastic and make sure that we're not impacting those animals in that way. We've stopped hunting otters, and we've seen a big change since then. If we can stop putting trash in our oceans, we'll hopefully see a big change from them. So I hope you all, we're going to be wrapping it up here. It looks like one last thing, Rebecca was interested in other animals at our aquarium. So we wanted to end our program by showing you a beautiful sight of, oh, look, there's a sea turtle, of our Shark Lagoon habitat. This is one of my favorite places here at the aquarium. So we spent a lot of time looking at Blue Cavern today. We're going to end it with our Coral Reef Tropical Shark Lagoon. This is housing warmer water species. So we have our sea turtle right here. We have that's a gray reef shark. That might be a black tip. And we've got a lot of tropical fish and coral calling it home. So like I said, we have over 12,000 animals here, and we do have a handful of webcams for you to explore. We have our Honda Blue Cavern, which we already saw. We have our, this is our zebra shark, right? We have our Shark Lagoon. We also have a moon jellies webcam. We have a sea nettles. That's another kind of jelly webcam. We have a lot of different options for you to explore. We have penguins. So I encourage you to continue exploring, continue learning about the oceans. Thank you all so much for joining us this summer. I hope you enjoyed our programming. We definitely enjoyed answering your questions, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of July and rolling into August. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great Tuesday. Bye.